So it's my pleasure to introduce Lauren Moore. Lauren is the Assistant Commissioner for Libraries and our New York State Librarian. Lauren, you've been in the job since August 2019, which seems like way longer ago than August 2019. At this point, we've had the pleasure of meeting with Lauren monthly for our calls with ESLN. So we've had so much interaction and time to talk with you this past year, and it's been wonderful. Lauren was our featured speaker at last year's annual meeting, and we've invited her back today to give us an update on what's going on in Albany at the State Library. So thanks, Lauren, for being here.
Good morning, Tessa. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm going to do my best to keep things short and keep everything moving on schedule, especially since I really love to be here to learn and what you're all up to and to hear from you, probably more than I like talking about what's going on. But I'm going to share a couple of things that are happening at the State Library and the State Education Department that I think are important and helpful and will hopefully be part of what allows libraries to move forward, do what's right, and create a community of support as we kind of move on to the next phase of life now. So when I was here a year ago, it was just after George Floyd was murdered. It was a really intense moment for me personally, I think for a lot of people as well, to experience this moment where people were taking to the streets talking about demanding justice and an end of institutionalized violence against people of color, on top of what we were experiencing during the pandemic, which was obviously wide-scale grief and tragedy, and a tragedy that was disproportionately affecting people of color. And then continuing to live another year in this reality that was really difficult. And I'm sure we all experience loss and fear and sadness. And so what do we do now that we're here a year later on June 4th, 2021, where there's this moment of great optimism and promise? We know the vaccine is readily available. Anyone who wants it can get it. We know that schools and libraries and businesses and services are reopening and providing that sense of community and social supports that we've been missing for the past, more than 1 year. So how do we tie that moment of optimism, this moment of promise, this moment of rebuilding and restarting things together with this, I think, this heaviness of realizing the systemic inequities that were laid bare during this past year, something that we can't close our eyes to, something that we can't forget, and something that has to be part of the work that we do moving forward. So I don't have all the answers, except that it's something that I think we have to do, and something that we're trying to do, and something that I feel really, really fortunate to be part of the State Education Department, which, although it is a massive institution, we all work for institutions, but I happen to work for a particularly giant and complex institution. But even at an institution of this size, I feel confident, and everyone who works in this department knows that at the heart of the ethos of this department is a commitment to equity, a commitment to anti-racism, a commitment to care and community. So that even though changes happen slowly and incrementally, I believe that the Board of Regents and every single person who is making decisions on behalf of the communities we serve, the students we serve, the libraries we serve, is doing it with an eye to achieving a just and equitable society. So a couple things have gone on over this past year, which were really exciting, and I think put some of those values to work. Between the CARES Act and the ARP Act, the New York State Library received nearly $9 million in federal funding, which is a huge amount of money. That's more than we get in a typical year. And although our ARPA plans are still embargoed, I can't share exactly what we're going to be doing with those funds. I can say that the vast majority of the funds that we received at the State Library are funds that we're putting back out to the field to help libraries do work, to help libraries be resilient and respond and make local decisions that will help libraries help individuals. Throughout both federal funding packages, we are prioritizing digital inclusion and digital equity, which is one of the congressional intents of these bills, but I think it's something that ties really closely to the mission of the State Library and the State Education Department. And we're trying to shift the conversation really from digital equity to digital justice. We know that libraries play an important role in digital inclusion, which is like getting people the tools they need to get online. But when we think about digital equity, we're taking a step back. We're looking at not just those tools, but the systems in place and the barriers in place that make access inequitable. So how do we use our power as libraries to address those systems? We conducted a series of digital equity summits on behalf of the State Education Department, where we pulled together stakeholders from across the state, not just in libraries, not just in education, but in every sector, because we started from the acknowledgement that the State Education Department can't solve digital inequity on our own. Even though the issue of students lacking internet resources to complete their homework during the pandemic was apparent and like this very immediate and intense example of inequities, we knew the State Education Department and our partners couldn't do it alone. Rather, creating a systems level or society level solution will involve everyone. And people came to the table that were amazing and had wonderful ideas, and a sense of commitment to this struggle in a way that I hadn't seen before. I think as librarians, we are always talking about digital equity. We're always talking about access and barriers to access. But over the past year, for the first time, people in decision-making roles outside of libraries were using the same rhetoric that librarians had always been using, which is that not everyone has access to the internet. Affordability remains the most significant barrier. Whether you're in a rural or urban setting, affordability remains the biggest challenge. That's a difficult thing for someone decision-making to admit to, because it's not as simple as throwing money at fiber. It's a larger systemic problem that's going to involve everyone helping to dismantle barriers and getting people online. But people were starting to admit that and say that and come to the table from that assumption. So we had these really wonderful conversations, and through the information that we collected, the department has prepared a report, which will be announced on Monday, that outlines a blueprint for change. It's very high level thinking, but we hope it will be useful to not just libraries, not just schools, but all partners on the ground who are working to achieve digital equity. Some of the high level priorities are most likely going to be around making sure that there is a state level commitment to digital inclusion. Right now, there's definitely state level commitment to, sorry, my camera is about to go wild, which happens sometimes. I might have to turn it off. I'm just going to turn it off. There tends to be a state level commitment to access, but not always a state level commitment to the human parts of access that we know are so critical. You can't simply give someone a free internet connection and expect them to succeed online. So how do we create policy and state level emphasis on digital inclusion? The plan will most likely look to a shift in thinking from digital equity to digital justice, acknowledging that other forms of systemic oppression are really at the heart of digital inequities. So taking a step back, acknowledging who's disproportionately affected by the digital divides tend to be people of color, people with lower incomes, older people, people with disabilities, people who are excluded in other aspects of society. And so centering anti-racism and equity at the heart of all work related to digital equity. And finally, thinking about digital ecosystems. So what we found through these events was that, again, just as the State Education Department can't do this work alone, at a regional and local level, individual institutions can't do this work alone. So what do we do as a state, as a community, as people who care about equity to create digital ecosystems that will allow everyone to have a role and everyone to succeed and everyone to thrive? So I'm really excited for that report to come out on Monday. Be on the lookout for it. And then one final update, actually I have two final updates that are quick. One is that we're really excited about the bill that was just passed through the legislature to modernize and streamline library funding. This is a significant, if it gets passed by the governor, it will be a significant improvement for our library community. All aspects of this bill actually simplify and combine elements of the complex library aid formula to ensure, again, that local library systems have the authority and flexibility they need to weather any storm. So we're really looking forward to that. And we want to thank Nyla and everyone who advocated on behalf of that bill. And finally, on June 1st, the State Library announced that we would start expecting libraries to be open the number of hours required within minimum standards for libraries. It actually wasn't a very controversial position because through our research, we saw that libraries were already open for the most part. But what it signals is just an acknowledgement that we're back and that libraries are critical and part of our communities and necessary to our communities. And then as of June 1st, like they're back and they're here. And so as we reclaim that space in the public, like in the public life, I just urge us all to work together to continue to communicate and continue to think about how we can take the lessons that we learned over this past year, what we saw, the inequities we saw, and make sure that as we reopen, as we serve our public again, that we are keeping equity, anti-racism, and just a commitment to care and community at the heart of the decisions we make. And so that we can make this next phase a phase where libraries continue to be as important as they ever were and serve that unique role that we know we can play for our communities. So thank you everyone for having me here. I'm sorry my camera flipped out, but I will continue to watch with my camera off. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lauren. You have a wonderful way of explaining what's going on and talking about these issues, and your support up in Albany is, really paving the way for the rest of us. So thank you so much.